Colleen Stan.
Can you power up it or not? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people
behind Mary.
We had a little jaws over. Oh, good. Yeah. What happened to her?
Just get warm, guys. That's it.
I need Maggie's water when I speak. Or anyone's water, just
Give me water.
I'll grab it.
Now?
Of course. No. Once I speak.
Good to go? Good morning, everybody. I'm Senator Brian Jones, the Senate Minority Leader here in California. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this beautiful Sacramento morning. Today, we stand together with victims, survivors, advocates, law enforcement, and a bipartisan group of legislators to urge support for Senate Bill 286 called Mary Bella's Law. This bipartisan bill closes a dangerous loophole in California's elderly parole program that allows rapists to walk free decades before serving their full sentence, simply because they turned 50 years old. It is important to understand how we got here. In 2020, a last-minute bill quietly expanded elderly parole without a single Senate policy or fiscal hearing. The budget bill lowered the parole age from 60 to 50, making violent sex offenders eligible for early release after serving just 20 years of their sentence, no matter how long their original sentence was. Proponents promised at that time that rapists and sex offenders would be excluded, but that protection was never included in the final law. And to this day, those responsible for that mistake refuse to fix it. Quite obviously, this major policy change has little to do with the budget and everything to do with transparency. Legislators never heard from victims before this bill passed. Today, we are bringing their voices to the Capitol for everybody to hear their stories. Mary Bella's Law corrects this injustice by prohibiting violent sex offenders from ever being eligible for elderly parole. Survivors and their families should never have to live in fear that their attacker could walk free long before serving their full sentence. Nor should they be forced to relive their trauma by repeatedly fighting to keep their perpetrators behind bars. This is about honoring the promises made to victims when their attackers were sentenced and ensuring the law protects law-abiding Californians, not violent criminals. Our bill is named after Mary Johnson and Bella Clark, two survivors whose lives were upended when their attackers became eligible for elderly parole. Today you will hear Mary's story and how this program reopened decades-old trauma. You will also hear from Bella's sister, Clara, about her family's fight to keep Bella's perpetrator behind bars. You will also hear from survivors Colleen Stan, whose experience was the subject of the Lifetime film Girl in the Box, and Joanna Call, who will share their powerful stories of survival. This bill is bipartisan because standing up for victims and what's right is not a partisan issue. I want to give a special thank you to the San Diego District Attorney Summer Stephan, who is our bill's sponsor, for her leadership, her dedication, and helping to continue to protect survivors. And with that, I would like to introduce and invite DA Summer Stephan to the podium.
Hello, I'm Summer Stephan, San Diego County District Attorney, and I am overwhelmed by the courage of the people here behind me. It's amazing that after something horrific happens to you, that you have to continue years later to fight for justice. When our Constitution in California enshrined victims' rights Unfortunately, that constitutional right that gave victims the right to be respected, to be told the truth about the sentence that their attacker would receive, and not have that change in the dark of night, was not respected. The rule of law that's in our Constitution wasn't followed when the age for elder parole was dropped to 50 years old. Under what standard, under what rule does 50 years old qualify as an elder? Not only that, it directed the parole board to consider the age, to give great weight to the fact that the person was over 50, to give great weight to what they've done in prison. Well, guess what? In prison, they don't have children and women that they are going to attack. That is no standard at all. We show up as prosecutors with our hands tied behind our back because the rule goes against us. I am so grateful for the leadership of Senator Brian Jones for fighting for this and bringing this forward. But it's the voices of the people here that are really going to be sounding loud. We have to change this. Before I became the elected district attorney, I formed a sex crimes unit. I tried many, many cases involving rape. I had one of the worst calls in my life when I had to talk with a victim who was raped after being shown a gun and her boyfriend murdered, executed. I had to tell her that, yes, that whole trial we went through, we won. The jury believed her. He had his day in court. He received a life sentence with a minimum of 77 years, that he's now 50 and he's eligible for parole. She had to come up for that parole hearing and put herself again through that trauma. I heard her voice crack as if it was happening to her again. This is simply wrong, and we have to change it. And this law will begin that change, putting justice for victims ahead of just freebies for criminals. Thank you.
Thank you, DA Stephan. I appreciate you being here today. Next, we have Senator Suzette Martinez-Valladares, who is a co-author of the bill, and she'll share some thoughts on it from her perspective.
Thank you, and I want to thank Leader Jones and District Attorney Summer Steffens and the many tireless victims advocates standing here with us today. Your work means the world to those who have suffered the most and to those who often go unheard. Mary Bella's law is a necessary and overdue fix. It closes a dangerous loophole that has allowed violent sexual offenders to walk free before serving their full time. And this should never happen. We've already seen what this looks like up close, as victims, like so many of you here today, have been forced to fight again for justice that was already promised. The worst of our violent sexual predators should not receive freedom for a 50th birthday present. And innocent victims should not have to fight tirelessly just to prevent it. So we're here to fight for them, for all of the Marys, for all of the Bellas, from the high desert in my district to the rolling hills in Senator Jones' district, and all throughout California. This fight is for all victims. And to say that our state prioritizes them and not their attackers. Our families should not live in fear with a system that bends over backwards to accommodate the people who cause them harm. No more. We need to get serious here. Violent criminals should not be released early, period. Accountability matters. Public safety matters. And victims, they deserve better than a justice system that forgets them the moment the sentence is handed down. I urge the Senate Public Safety Committee to pass this bill, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce Mary Johnson to share her story.
Hi, I'm Mary Johnson. The man who perpetrated against me assaulted 4 women before raping me as a child. I'm Jane Doe number 5 for him. I am the Mary in Mary Bella's Law. At 13 years old, while I was a foster child, I was sexually abused, raped repeatedly, tortured, shamed, and degraded by my uncle. This happened because our state government believed that a convicted sex offender deserved a 4th chance at parole, a chance that ultimately resulted in me spending my entire life fighting the effects of trauma. This man had already proven that he was a danger to women and girls, and yet after his 4th rape, California believed him when he said that he would no longer offend. And because of that decision, I lost my sense of safety and trust. Eventually, my abuser was rightfully sentenced to 170 years in prison. The judge understood that while he may have verbalized a desire to stop, that his impulse control and sexual deviancy deemed him incapable. The judge affirmed that regardless of age, he posed an imminent threat to people, to society. Knowing that justice had been served, I spent the last 30 years very slowly approaching the trauma, the deep psyche wounds that he left behind. And while I should have been allowed to approach that healing at my own pace, I was not. I was thrusted back into that nightmare. When 27 years into his sentence, he requested and was granted early release, citing California's elderly parole law. Essentially, he said that he's no longer a threat because he has a bad back and gastric acid reflux, both of which make him less of a threat because he was now over the age of 50. I had to sit before a panel of strangers who then went on to grant his parole. My life was suddenly turned upside down, and for the next year I found myself fighting internally and externally in front of the media. I had to go before 3 more panels. I had to beg our governor. I had to ask everyone who was willing to fight with us to write to the governor to ask them to review this case. And he did. And then I had to go before another panel of strangers and tell them the heinous, horrific acts that were committed against me. And again, suddenly, I was no longer a 49-year-old woman, but I was a 13-year-old trapped and powerless and fighting again. And no victim's family should have to fight over and over again to ensure that a dangerous predator serves the sentence that they were given. And that's why we need SB 286, Mary Bella's Law. This legislation will ensure that convicted sex offenders, child molesters, and rapists who have committed heinous crimes are not granted early release simply because they turn age 50. It acknowledges that as long as 50-year-olds can conjure up sexual deviancy, that they are fully capable of carrying it out. SB 286, Senator Jones's law, prioritizes our healing over the predator's release. It says that once justice is served, it should remain intact. A yes to SB 286 is a yes to protecting victims. It's a yes to safety, and it's a yes to allowing us survivors to finally start to heal. So I urge you to pass Mary Bella's Law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for your courage and dedication to this bill. We will now hear from Clara Stansbury, who will share Bella's story.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Clara Stansbury, and I stand before you as the sister of Bella, who was kidnapped and abused when she was 5 years old. Since that day, I have dedicated my life to protecting her, and now I dedicate my life to fighting for justice for victims and families like ours. Bella is a victim, and she deserves protection. She deserves a future that is not haunted by the actions of a man who stole her childhood. Yet today I stand here in front of you not only as Bella's sister, but as a symbol of families throughout California fighting against a state hell-bent on making victims relive their trauma over and over for the benefit of their abusers and attackers. Senate Bill 286 will prevent predators like the man who turned Bella into a victim and shattered our family from qualifying for elderly parole. Mary Bella's law will eliminate one of the many ways these monsters can continue tormenting their victims even behind bars. This bill is not just a piece of legislation. It's a statement that we as a society will prioritize victims, not the offenders. It is a statement that we will not allow the wounds of our loved ones to be constantly reopened. It is a statement that justice matters no matter how old or sick an offender may be. The parole hearings that victims are forced to attend are re-traumatizing and re-victimizing. Every time an offender is up for parole, victims have to relive the pain of what was done to them. It's like opening a wound that will never fully heal. I asked the Public Safety Committee to pass Mary Bella's law to support this vital piece of legislation and to make it clear that we will no longer allow those who harm children to receive leniency based on age alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Clara and Bella. Now please help me welcome Colleen Stan, who is also known as the girl in the box.
Okay. I'm not an elegant speaker like all those other survivors, but I am Colleen Stan, and I am here to speak about how the elderly parole hearing was very traumatizing to me. My perpetrator, Cameron Hooker, was given an elderly parole hearing in April of 2015. One of the reasons listed on the elderly parole law is diminished physical condition. I take offense to that condition, as do all other survivors who have come out alive after having these heinous crimes committed against us. These are criminals we are talking about. They're not the nice guy next door. Our society needs to be protected from these criminals and not be terrorized by the fact that this person is free to commit more crimes against them again. My perpetrators kidnapped me, forced me to live in slavery for over 7 years, locked me up in a box, not much bigger than a coffin, tortured me, raped me, sodomized me, whipped me, electrocuted me, stretched me on a torture device, dislocating my left shoulder and damaging my spine from where it connects to my head all the way down to my tailbone. I now have degenerative arthritis in my spine, which means it is breaking down my cartilage in my spine and causing me pain and reduces my mobility. Many more things happened during my captivity, but I'm not going to get into them here. But I want to get back to the elderly parole hearing and diminished physical condition. My perpetrator's diminished physical condition was considered at the hearing, and it wasn't an issue. But my diminished physical condition is an issue. Along with my mental condition, my crippling PTSD, and other damages, it complicates all areas of my life, causing me to have major trust issues with all human beings, and I tend to self-isolate because I just don't want to be hurt by anyone again. So you can imagine the panic and trauma that set in when I got the letter for my perpetrator's elderly parole hearing. The unbelief that a man who was sentenced to 104 years in 1985 was getting a parole hearing in 2015. It was truly terrifying. I ended up in the ER with high blood pressure in the 200s over 100s. Our justice system has to change. Hopefully, Bill 286 will be the start of making these changes. We cannot continue giving these violent offenders parole hearings just because they are old. They have committed heinous crimes and shouldn't be free to commit crimes again. God help us.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. And lastly, we will hear from Joanna Call to share her survival story. Joanna?
I am a survivor of a violent rape at knife point. It was arranged by family members when I was 14. I am a survivor of having to sit in the same room as my perpetrator 60 years early to plead my case to keep my family and community safe. This was arranged by the state of California. I am a survivor of learning that the person who raped me, stabbed me 3 times, broke all my ribs, my nose, and my jaw, was going to be released without a hearing. He could live 35 miles from my home. Arranged by people who never had to be terrified to be in the presence of evil. I am here today to say I am a survivor of enough. My freedom is more important than my perpetrator. My attacker doesn't deserve more freedom than the victims they created. This is why we need SB 286, Mary Bella's Law. No survivor should have to relive their worst nightmares because a system prioritizes an offender's rights over victim safety. This bill ensures that violent predators serve the sentences they were given, instead of forcing survivors to fight for justice all over again. My safety and the safety of every victim should never be up for debate. For those who are too scared to speak, we are Jane Doe's voice.
I want to thank Joanna and all the survivors, advocates, and supporters who have joined us here today. What an awesome display of strength from these survivors. I want to thank DA Summer Stephan and all the DAs in California that continue to fight every single day for survivors and making sure that survivors' rights are the most important rights here in California. SB 286 ensures that rapists and child molesters remain in prison where they belong. To every Californian watching today, please speak up. Demand that your representative, your assembly member, your senator support SB 286. Nearly 700 Californians have already signed our petition, and I invite all of Californians to do that as well, as support is growing every day. We will not allow California to continue prioritizing criminals over victims. SB 286 will be heard in the Senate Public Safety Committee immediately after this press conference. We call on all legislators, Democrat and Republican, to stand with victims and close this dangerous and unfair loophole. I want to thank all of the press that's here this morning and all of the public that's here this morning to cover this very important bill and this very important issue, but most importantly, to give the victims the voices that they deserve to have. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @SEN Brian Jones. You can follow me for updates on this issue and all issues that we'll be dealing with in California. And at this time, if there are questions, we'd be happy to take those questions. Yes, ma'am.
I know you're going into a committee hearing. What do you expect to hear from people who don't support your bill?
That's a pretty interesting question. The question is, what do I expect to hear from people that don't support the bill? First of all, the people that don't support the bill haven't lived through the hell that these people have lived through. That's number one. Number two, I don't know what argument they could make that would make sense in this case with these victims and these crimes that have been committed. I can share with you that we've had very robust conversations with every member on that committee. I think we're making progress on this issue, and I'm looking forward to a very polite, obviously, conversation, but hopefully productive, and get the bill passed and out of committee today. Sure. So as you may know, we've started working on this issue almost immediately in 2020 when this passed in the dead of night through a budget bill and the last week of session without any policy hearings that year about it, no fiscal hearings that year about it. It was just slammed into a budget bill that had nothing to do with this issue in the first place. We had a bill in 2021 trying to repeal that at the time, arguing that this process is going to re-victimize the victims. Well, at that point in time, that was considered theoretical. The committee wasn't open to our arguments at that point in time. But today, 4 years later, we now have stories that back up what we were concerned about at that point in time. There's been a change in the Public Safety Committee on both the Senate and the Assembly with new chair people that were recently elected, new members on the committee. So we've had the opportunity to start from scratch with those new members and the new chairman, and they've been, as I said, very productive and I hope hopeful. Well, with that, again, thank you all for coming out this morning. Thank you to the survivors for sharing once again. We will be going back into the swing space building. The hearing will be in committee room 2200, which is on the second floor of what we call the swing space, the O Street building.